I'm not ashamed to hold my Lord, nor to defend his cause. Maintain the honors of his word, the glory of his cross.
We are in Revelation chapter 13 this morning. Revelation chapter 13. We have covered in the first 12 chapters of this book, we've always gone back to make the point that the things we're reading about are about things that were shortly to come to pass. That's what the first verse says. Now, when it was written 2,000 years ago. And so when we see shortly to come to pass, we must not take that to mean shortly in our future. There are many things in the Bible that we can apply to us because they do affect us. But in certain contexts of the Bible, we need to remember that some things were written to different churches about things that they were facing. We can learn from the 7 churches of Asia what Christ expects of us and what Christ doesn't expect of us. But those things aren't necessarily what's going on in this congregation. Some things might be, some things might not be. The church in Corinth in 1 Corinthians chapter 5 had a problem about a man living in fornication. Well, we can learn about things about that, but that chapter did pertain to them. Same thing with the Lord's Supper. About the Corinthians were literally not partaking of the Lord's Supper properly. We can learn about how to take the Lord's Supper properly, but that the admonition that Paul was giving was for them. Well, so it is with Revelation, that when we read of things that would shortly to come to pass, it doesn't mean we can't learn anything from this book. We can learn a lot of things from this book. But let's remember that these were events of the first century that were going to be happening. Let's also remember that we are dealing with highly symbolic language. Numbers don't mean numbers. They usually represent certain things. And we have seen that through the Old Testament and through the New Testament, that numbers, when we read of 144,000, or we read of 10 horns, or 7 churches, or 7 scrolls, that they are representative of something, 7 and 10 being completeness. Now we come to chapter 13, and we get to what many people in the denominational world like to focus on, and it is the beast. We hear a lot about the beast. Who is the beast? People ask. Oh, is this person the beast? Is the President of the United States, whoever he is. Doesn't matter what president. There will be some people coming along. Is the President of the United States the beast? Could have been Barack Obama, could have been Donald Trump, could have been George W. Bush, could be anybody. So people think that who is the beast? Well, we're going to read this chapter, and we're going to find out who the beast is. Because we can discern from the book of Revelation who the beast is. And in fact, in this chapter, there are 2. We don't often think of the beast being 2. We often think of 1, and because we have the sign of the beast, which is 666, and we wonder what that could mean. I do have one correction that I would like to make that I made at the end of last week's class, and I discussed that we would be dealing with the sign of the beast this week. Well, we're not, because the first beast isn't the one given the sign, it's the second beast. It's a minor correction, but it's one I will make. So, let's get Revelation chapter 13, verses 1 and 2. We'll start with Pill, sorry.
Then I stood on the sand of the sea, and I saw a beast rising up out of the sea, having 7 heads and 10 horns, and on his horns 10 crowns, and on his head a blasphemous name. Now the beast which I saw was like a leopard. His feet were like the feet of a bear, and his mouth like the mouth of a lion. The dragon gave him his power, his throne, and his great authority.
All right, so here we have a description of the beast that now appears. He is a very wicked beast. He is following the will of the dragon. Let's also remember, though, that chapters and verses are put in by man. Remember what verse 17 of chapter 12 said. And the dragon was enraged with the woman, and he made war with the rest of her offspring, who keep the commandments of the Lord and have the testimony of Jesus Christ. We have then transferring to this scene. Then I stood on the sand of the sea and saw a beast rising up out of the sea. And so this completely follows the end of chapter 12 with the dragon persecuting the seed of the woman, which of course we have determined is the church, or the remnant of those who are saved, the church. And so that is where we get the beginning of the 13th chapter. So our first question is, describe the beast that came out of the sea. Describe the beast. We'll go back to these two verses. Describe the beast that came out of the sea.
Has 10 horns, 7 heads, 10 diadems on its horns, and blasphemous names on its heads.
All right, so we see 10 horns. 10 represents completeness. So in other words, it was this was similar to the dragon in his completeness of evil and in that way. We have 7 heads. Again, 7 is, this is a very interesting picture, but 7 being represented, of course, of completeness. And then we have 10 diadems, or I think, Bill, you said crowns, right? Your version said crowns.
The King James, yeah.
Yeah.
10 crowns.
10 crowns on his head. What do crowns usually represent?
Kingship.
Kingship, authority. 10 crowns on its horns, and blasphemous names on its head. So this is, would this be a good person or a bad person? This is a bad person. When we think of blasphemy, that's never good. Blasphemy is never good in the New Testament. If we blaspheme God, we're speaking against God. And so we have this beast rising out of the sea. He came, remember, who's this book written to?
Christians who were persecuted.
Specifically, though, in this book.
John.
7 churches. 7 churches. So we have the beast coming out of the sea. It's not going to be coming out of Asia itself. It's going to be coming out from someplace else. It's coming from abroad. We don't exactly know yet where. We will later. But it's coming out of the sea. 7 heads like the dragons, totally evil. Had 10 horns with 10 crowns, total power. And he had the name blasphemy, or blasphemous names, on his head. He was opposed to the will of God and the name of God. So this beast that we have here is going to be opposed to Christ and opposed to Christians. Give me that look again, Bill.
No, I'm just going to say he's pretty much the same as the in chapter 12 and 3, the dragon.
Yeah, he's not the dragon, because the dragon, he's going to be given power by the dragon. But you're exactly right. We're going to find that the beast and the dragon, and we'll find the false prophet, which is actually one of these beasts, going to be aligned together. The dragon was Satan. The Revelation 12 identified the dragon as Satan. This beast we have yet to identify. We will later on identify who this was. But he was along the same lines as the dragon, described very similarly as the dragon, even though he's not the dragon. Now, at the end of, in verse 2, what was the beast like?
Like a leopard, feet like a bear's, and nose like a lion.
Yeah. So in other words, he was like a leopard, his feet were like a bear's, and its mouth like a lion's mouth. That would, if this was not figurative language, that would be quite awesome to look at. But this language is going to help us identify who this beast is. Because right now John has not really identified him. But if we contrast this to Daniel chapter 7, an Old Testament prophecy, we're going to find very similar language there that will help us in figuring out who this beast is. Let's go back to Daniel chapter 7. And we'll start with Cal. We'll read 1 through 8 and 17 through 27. We'll read one slide each, and whoever wants to read can read, and if not, you can pass to the person off to the side.
In the first year of Belshazzar, king of Babylon, Daniel saw a dream and visions of his head as he lay in his bed. Then he wrote down the dream and told the sum of the matter. Daniel declared, I saw in my vision by night, and behold, the four winds of heaven were stirring up the great sea.
And four great beasts came up out of the sea, different from one another. The first was like a lion and had eagle's wings. Then as I looked, its wings were plucked off, and it was lifted up from the ground and made to stand on 2 feet like a man, and the mind of a man was given to it.
Come back to Shudon.
And behold, another beast, a second one, like a bear. It was raised upon one side. It had 3 ribs in its mouth between its teeth. And it was told, arise, draw much flesh. After this I looked, and behold, another like a neighbor, with 4 ones of a boat on his back, and the beast had 4 heads, and the moon was given to it.
After this I saw in the night visions, and behold, the fourth beast, terrifying and dreadful and exceedingly strong, and it had great iron teeth. It devoured and broke in pieces, and stamped what was left with its feet. It was different from all the beasts that were before it, and it had 10 horns. I considered the horns, and behold, they came up among the another horn, the little one, before which 3 of the first horns was rounded up by the roots, and behold, in its horn were eyes like the eyes of a man, and a mouth speaking great things.
All right, we're going to skip down to 17 and read through 27. We'll start with 10.
These 4 great beasts are all kings who shall rise out of earth. But the saints of the Most High shall receive the kingdom and possess the kingdom forever and ever.
I wish to know the truth about the fourth beast, which was different from all other. Its siblings dreadful, which with it is of iron, and its name of bronze, which devoured broke in pieces, and trampled in each side with its feet. And the 10 horns they were on his head, and the other horn which came up, before which 3 fell, namely the horn which had eyes, and a mouth which spoke pompous words, whose appearance was greater than his fellows.
As I looked, this horn made war with the saints and prevailed over them, until the Ancient of Days came and judgment was given to the saints of the Most High, and the time came when the saints possessed the kingdom.
Thus he said, as for the 4th beast, there shall be a 4th kingdom on earth, which shall be different from all the kingdoms, and it shall devour the whole earth, and trample it down, and break it in pieces. As for the 10 horns, out of this kingdom 10 kings shall arise, and another shall arise after them. He shall be different from the former ones, and shall put down 3 kings.
And he shall speak words against the Most High, and shall wear out the saints of the Most High, and shall think to change the times and the law. And they shall be given into his hand for a time, times, and half a time. But the court shall sit in judgment, and his dominion shall be taken away to be consumed and destroyed to the end.
And the kingdom and the dominion and the greatness of the kingdoms under the whole heaven shall be given to the people of the saints of the Most High. Their kingdom shall be an everlasting kingdom, and all dominion shall serve and obey them.
All right, we have 4 beasts mentioned in Daniel. And we don't get the exact same representation of this 4th beast compared to what we read in Revelation. What is the same, though? Did you catch what was the same about the 4th beast and this first beast in Revelation? How many horns did he have? He had 10 horns. He looked very similar. The language used, remember the language used in Revelation was used for a reason. Because that will bring to mind the Old Testament. And this is pointing back, saying, look at the Old Testament. Look at the prophecies of Daniel. There were 4 beasts. Throughout the prophecies of Daniel, there are 4 kingdoms. What's the first kingdom? Babylonian kingdom. That's the first kingdom. What was the second kingdom? The Medes and the Persians was the second kingdom. What was the third kingdom? The Greek kingdom was the third kingdom. And what was the fourth kingdom? The Roman kingdom is the 4th kingdom. And it is during the Roman kingdom that Christ comes. This 4th beast described in Daniel, even though he is not identified as Rome in Daniel, he is, the 4th beast is Rome. It is the same as when we had the picture of the head of gold, the breastplate of silver, the thighs of bronze, and then the feet of miry clay. Same thing. So this 4th beast, which is Rome, was going to wreak havoc among the church, but he was not going to prevail. He had dominion for a time, times, and half a time. What number is that? 3.5. Time, 1, times 2, so that's 3, and half a time is 3.5. 3.5 is half of 7, meaning it's incomplete. And so it is this 4th beast that these terrible events were going to happen. Now we come along to Revelation, and John is describing this beast using the same language that Daniel is using, or very similar language to Daniel is using. And so this 4th kingdom, this beast here, is the Roman Empire. And that's how we can know that that's what Revelation is talking about, is because he is pointing back to Daniel. And so when we talk about the beast, no, the beast isn't our Prime Minister Justin Trudeau. The beast isn't Donald Trump in the United States. The beast isn't anyone in our future. The beast is the Roman Empire. Bill.
In verse 2, is that not saying the Roman Empire has the combined power of all those other kingdoms?
Are you in Daniel or Revelation?
Yeah, Revelation.
Okay. Yeah.
Like, well, we had no explanation for the leopard
Yeah.
and the dragon. Those were all symbols
Yeah.
of those kingdoms?
Yeah.
Right? Oh,
Yeah. Well, I'm trying to go back. Give me a second. Try to go back to where in Revelation we are. Like as far as he was like these things, it was sort of a combination. The Roman kingdom was a combination of all those kingdoms. We think of a leopard and a bear and a lion's mouth. Those are fierce animals. They all have their own power and their own. A leopard, we usually think of. What do we think of a leopard?
Swift.
Swift. Okay, like that. We think of a bear. Powerful, and a lion. Well, usually a lion's more kingly. Kingly. And so this beast is a combination of a whole bunch of kingdoms. It's not going to be just one monolithic kingdom. That's the Roman Empire. That's described, even described in Daniel, about that feat of miry clay. It was an amalgamation. Rome was a unique empire at that time. The Babylonian Empire was Babylonian, Chaldean. It didn't really amalgamate everyone. You got killed by Nebuchadnezzar. Yes, the Jews were taken slaves, but they didn't become part of the Babylonian kingdom. The Medes and the Persians, they were Persian. They were not a mixture of nations. They were Persian. Then even the Grecian Empire, it was Greek under Alexander the Great. The Roman Empire is different to any of those empires. The Romans, yes, they started out as Rome, but they took in everyone they conquered. What was the language of the Roman Empire? What's the Bible written in? Greek. There was Latin and there was Greek. The Grecian language, you would expect, oh, they conquered Greece. Why is Greek powerful? Because the Romans took the Greeks in, accepted their language, accepted their culture. You take a look at the Roman gods and the Greek gods, and sometimes even in English, when we study them, we sort of say, okay, Jupiter, which is the biggest planet, is the same as Zeus in Greek mythology. Their gods are very similar too. We come along with Mercury's, I think it's Hermes that corresponds to that. And there's a whole bunch of others. They correspond. They take their culture. They take their language. And because of that, the Roman Empire is not as strong. When you do not have a cultural identity to bring people together, you typically are not as strong. Because when push comes to shove, what do people usually rally behind?
What they know, what their past is,
Yeah.
their own culture.
Yeah, culture. When you think about it, nations, when they feel that they are being pinned in, when they are being confronted, they usually draw back on the past and their culture. They look at immigrants and other races with suspicion. I'm not saying that's right, but that's typically what nations do. They look at, okay, you're not, if we're talking about Canada, you're not Canadian. You're not true Canadian, therefore you are my enemy. And in Rome, there was no culture to sort of lean to. And so that's why this kingdom, even though it was strong, was not as strong as other kingdoms. And that's why it was a feat of miry clay. And so this fourth kingdom, this beast in Revelation that we're seeing, is the Roman Empire. And that's what we need to remember. And that'll get us to question 2. Who gave power to the beast of the sea?
The dragon.
The dragon gave power to the beast of the sea. He gave him his seat and his authority. Remember, the dragon in chapter 12 was fully evil. He's the devil. And he is roaming here on this earth, but remember, the devil is not a physical being. It's a spiritual being. And so the devil gave authority, gave power to the Roman Empire. In other words, he lifted them up. He was the one who, he's the one who tempts us. He puts thoughts into our minds that sin is good and God is evil. And he raised the Roman Empire to fight against God. Rome thought of itself as ruling by the will of the gods, when in fact it was the devil that was behind what they were doing. The dragon gave him power. It wasn't God that gave the beast here power to persecute his church. God has dominion over the kings of this earth. He raises kingdoms and he lets kingdoms fall as he will. But he is not responsible for the evil that kingdoms do. He is not responsible for that. Mankind is responsible for evil. The devil is responsible for tempting us with evil. It's not God who is responsible for tempting us with evil. It is the devil, and it is us who yield, and it is us who are responsible. So we have that. The devil being, the dragon being one who gave authority to the beast of the sea. And so that'll bring us to verses 3 through 8. Where did we end off? I think we ended up with Kala, but we'll give Kala this one. We'll do one slide each, 3 to 8. Whoever wants to read again can read, and whoever doesn't, we'll pass it over to Shudong then.
One of its heads seemed to have a mortal wound, but its moral wound was healed, and the whole earth marveled as they followed the beast. And they worshipped the dragon, for he had given his authority to the beast, and they worshipped the beast, saying, Who is like the beast, and who can fight against it?
And the beast was given a mouth uttering haughty and blasphemous words, and it was allowed to exercise authority for 42 months. It opened its mouth to utter blasphemies against God, blaspheming his name and his dwelling, that is, those who dwell in heaven.
We'll come across to Shudong.
Also it was allowed to make war on the cities and to conquer them. And authority was given it over every tribe and people and language and nation. And all who dwell on earth will worship it, everyone whose name has not been written before the foundation of the world in the book of life of the name that was slain.
All right, so let's go back to verse 3 of Revelation 13. So, we have, the beast has one of its heads. What is a head usually represent in New Testament? Authority and king. Christ is the head of the church. He is the king. We are not. We are not the king. No matter what we might think, we do not have the authority. Well, who is the head of our government in Canada? Prime Minister, in this case, Justin Trudeau. Who is the head of our state? It's not Justin Trudeau. Please don't answer that. Of the entire country. Who is the head of state? Queen Elizabeth II is the head of state. The head of our government, the one who has authority. Well, theoretically speaking, the head of our state is Queen Elizabeth II. However, Queen Elizabeth II doesn't have much power. At one time, the Queen or King of England did. They ruled this land. It was not Canada, it was Britain. But over time, of course, we became our own country, and the King and Queen of England became more of a figurehead of our country. But it's still, heads represent kings and governments. What happened to one of the heads of the beast?
Wounded.
It was wounded. Now, many people try to figure out, well, what does that mean? We are not entirely given a picture of what that means. However, I'm just going to throw it out there just so people have a possibility, just a possibility. But some people believe, okay, at the time when Paul was being persecuted, does anyone know who the emperor of Rome was? In about 60 to 70 AD? Anyone remember? The guy who burned Rome? Nero. Nero was the Caesar of Rome, and he was very powerful. Of the Roman Caesars, he was very powerful, and he was known for persecuting Christians. He burned down Rome and then blamed it on the Christians for the reason why Rome burned down. And so Nero died. All right. If this beast is the Roman Empire, one of its heads, one of its kings died. Well, of course, that could be anybody, but this was a powerful king. And yet many believed he would he would or did live again. Remember, we don't believe this book was written in the time of Nero. We believe it was written about 15 years later, during the time of Domitian, who was another king, or another Caesar in Rome. And then you come along and it says this wound was healed. The verse says its mortal wound was healed. Another one rose up to replace the head. So whoever the head is, whether it's Nero or some other one, he died, a mortal wound, but someone replaced him. The beast wasn't killed and didn't go away. Someone else replaced him, and the world wondered in amazement as this happened. You would think, okay, a powerful king, you kill him, and revolution happens. Well, no, that's not what happened. Someone replaced him, and the world stood in amazement as they followed the beast. And so, what happened? What did the world do? What did the world do in verse 4? They worshipped the beast. Why does verse 4, you can sort of gather that from the end of verse 4. Why did they worship the beast? Or say they worshiped the dragon. Sorry, they worshiped the dragon, you're right. They worshipped the dragon for he had given power to the beast, and they worshipped the beast, that's true as well. What was their response? Why were they doing that?
Well, they thought they couldn't fight against them, for one thing.
They
Can't beat them, join them.
Yeah, well, that's basically it. Who is this beast? You kill one of its heads, and another one takes its place. Who is this beast? I just can't fight against it. So they worshipped the beast, and they worshipped the dragon. That is not an excuse as to why we sin. Well, I just couldn't know what God wanted me to do. I just couldn't know. People who do not have the truth, they come up with excuses as to why they serve the devil. In Romans chapter 1, for time's sake, because we are going to run out of time, Romans chapter 1, verses 24 to 31. Therefore God gave them up in the lust of their hearts to the impurity, to the dishonoring of their bodies among themselves, because they exchanged the truth about God for a lie, and worshipped and served the creature rather than the Creator, who is blessed forever. Amen. For this reason God gave them up to the dishonorable passions. For their women exchanged natural relations for those that are contrary to nature. And the men likewise gave up natural relations with women, and were consumed with passion for one another, men committing shameless acts with men, and receiving in themselves the due penalty for their error. And since they did not see fit to acknowledge God, God gave them up to a debased mind, to do what ought not to be done. They were filled with all manner of unrighteousness, evil, covetousness, malice. They are full of envy, murder, strife, deceit, maliciousness. They are gossips, slanderers, haters of God, insolent, haughty, boastful, inventors of evil, disobedient to parents, foolish, faithless, heartless, ruthless. This is what happens to people who do not obey God. They just live any way they want. They don't listen to their parents. They don't listen to God. They are evil. They worship the devil. And so we have this people here in the world in Revelation 13. They see this beast and they just accept. Now, that must be the way life is. Bill, did you have something before we close?
No, I just thought it's interesting, the power of God and the power of the devil. Both of them work through man.
Mm-hmm.
Neither one forces us to do what he wants.
Yeah.
That's what we're seeing here in Revelation.
Yeah.
The devil uses man to further his cause, but God uses us to further his cause.
And that's what we're going to see in through the rest of Revelation. You're absolutely right. God doesn't make us obey him, but the devil doesn't make us serve him as well. We are willingly going to serve one or the other. It is our choice. The devil doesn't overtake us. The devil doesn't force us. But God doesn't overtake us, and God doesn't force us. We have to choose. And so next week, then, I was going to get John 8:44. Next week, then, we will take up with question 4 on your sheet, which is, Who worship the beast of the sea? We will take up with that, the Lord willing, next week, and have further discussion on the beast.
I'm not ashamed to hold my Lord, nor to defend his cause. Maintain the honors of his word, the glory of